My rich brother looked at my wife and our newborn and said, "DNA test?" The room went silent. He smirked. "Too good-looking to be yours." I sat, humiliated. My wife couldn't look at my face. 2 weeks later, the doctor walked in. He looked at me, then at my whiff. His face darkened. "Call police. Now." Man, I'll never forget that moment. Like, seriously, it's burned into my brain forever. There I was, sitting in that sterile hospital chair next to Sierra's bed, just staring at this tiny little human we'd created. Noah, our son, 7 pounds, 3 ounces of pure perfection wrapped up in one of those scratchy hospital blankets that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. His fingers were so damn small, like little baby carrots, but softer. And when he wrapped those tiny fingers around my index finger, I swear to God, my whole world shifted. Everything I thought I knew about love just got blown out of the water. This wasn't the kind of love you feel for your wife or your parents or even your dog. This was something primal, something that reached into your chest and grabbed your heart with both hands. I kept thinking, holy crap, I'm somebody's dad now. The weight of that responsibility was already settling on my shoulders, but it felt good, like I'd finally found my purpose in life. All those years of screwing around, partying too hard, making stupid decisions, all of that felt like it was leading up to this exact moment. This perfect, quiet moment where it was just me, Sierra, and our baby boy. Sierra looked exhausted but beautiful, that post-delivery glow mixing with the kind of tired that goes bone deep. She'd been a trooper through the whole thing. 16 hours of labor, no epidural until the very end, because she wanted to experience everything naturally. That's my girl, always wanting to do things the hard way. But she'd done it, and now we had Noah to show for it. The room smelled like that weird hospital antiseptic mixed with the flowers my mom had brought earlier. You know that smell. It's supposed to be clean and fresh, but it just reminds you that you're in a place where people come to either get better or, well, let's not go there. This was supposed to be one of the good times, one of the happy hospital visits. That's when Roman showed up. My older brother's always been the type to make an entrance. Even as kids, he couldn't just walk into a room. He had to announce himself somehow. Usually with his voice, sometimes with his wallet, always with this energy that demanded everyone's attention. Today was no different. I heard him coming down the hall before I saw him. That booming laugh of his echoing off the walls, probably telling some nurse a joke or complimenting someone on their scrubs. "Where's my nephew?" he called out before he even stepped through the door. Classic Roman. He burst in carrying this massive teddy bear. Probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month, and wearing this grin that could sell ice to Eskimos. That's Roman for you. Everything's big, everything's expensive, everything's an event. He dropped the teddy bear in the corner and immediately zeroed in on Noah. "Let me see this little guy," he said, and for a second, everything felt normal. This was supposed to be one of those perfect family moments, Uncle Roman meeting his nephew for the first time, taking pictures we'd look back on years from now when Noah was graduating high school or getting married or whatever. But then something shifted. Roman leaned over the hospital bed, getting a good look at Noah's face. And I watched his expression change. The smile didn't disappear exactly, but it got different, sharper, like he was figuring out some puzzle that the rest of us couldn't see. He looked at Noah for what felt like forever. Then he looked at me, then back at Noah again. That's when he laughed. Not the warm, happy laugh you'd expect from a new uncle. This was something else entirely. This laugh had edges to it, like broken glass wrapped in velvet. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, though I couldn't figure out why. "DNA test?" he said. Just like that. 2 words that sucked all the air out of the room. I felt my stomach drop about 3 floors. "What the hell, Roman?" I managed to get out, but my voice sounded weird, like someone else was talking. He held up his hands in that fake innocent way he'd perfected over the years. "Hey, I'm just saying," he continued, and that smirk was growing wider. "Little guy's way too good-looking to be yours, Eli." The silence that followed was deafening. You know how sometimes you can actually hear quiet? Like, the absence of sound becomes its own kind of noise. That's what happened in that room. Even the machines seemed to stop beeping for a second. I looked at Roman, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to break character and say, "Just kidding, bro," the way he always did when his jokes went too far. But he didn't. He just stood there with that goddamn smirk, like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Then I looked at Sierra, and that's when my world started cracking apart. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't rolling her eyes at Roman's stupid sense of humor. She wasn't even looking at him. She was staring down at the hospital blanket, her face pale as the sheets, and her hands were shaking. The silence stretched on, and with every second that passed, that crack in my world got a little bit wider. Sierra should have been telling Roman to shut up, should have been defending our family, should have been doing anything except sitting there looking guilty as hell. But she didn't say a word. And somehow, that silence, her silence, was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in my life. 2 days. That's how long we stayed in that hospital, and those 48 hours felt like the longest stretch of my life. Sierra barely said 10 words to me that weren't about feeding schedules or discharge paperwork. It was like someone had flipped a switch and turned her into this robotic version of the woman I married. She'd answer direct questions with yes or no, but any attempt at real conversation just died in the air between us. The ride home was brutal. Noah slept in his brand new car seat, one of those expensive ones that probably cost more than my first car, while Sierra stared out the passenger window like she was memorizing every house we passed. I kept trying to fill the silence with stupid small talk about getting the nursery ready or how excited my mom was to babysit, but Sierra just nodded along without really listening. Our house felt different when we walked through the front door. Maybe it was because we had this tiny new person with us, or maybe it was because that elephant Roman had dropped in the hospital room had followed us home. Either way, the place that used to feel like our sanctuary now felt like a museum. Beautiful to look at, but cold and untouchable. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine. Hell, I gave myself a whole pep talk while Sierra was upstairs changing Noah's diaper. Roman's always been a jackass, I muttered to myself as I unloaded the car. Remember when he told Dad that I was the one who put sugar in his gas tank? Or when he convinced Aunt Mary that I was allergic to her cooking? The guy lives to stir up trouble. But even as I was telling myself this, I knew something was off. Roman's jokes usually had this obvious punchline to them, you know? They were mean-spirited, sure, but they were clearly jokes. This felt different. This felt like he knew something. Sierra threw herself into new mom mode like her life depended on it. And I mean threw herself. She was changing diapers every 20 minutes, sterilizing bottles that we hadn't even used yet, rearranging the nursery for the 3rd time in 2 days. She moved around the house like she was running from something, always busy, always focused on some task that absolutely had to be done right that second. The weird part was how good she was at avoiding me while still being in the same room. It's actually kind of impressive when you think about it, like some sort of advanced ninja skill. She'd be feeding Noah on the couch, and I'd sit down next to her, and somehow she'd need to get up right then to check something in the kitchen. Or I'd try to help with bath time, and suddenly she'd remember that she needed to call her mom or fold laundry or reorganize the medicine cabinet. But the worst part was the eye contact thing. Or rather, the complete lack of eye contact. Sierra's got these amazing green eyes, like the color of sea glass, and they've always been my favorite thing about her. When we first started dating, she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. Even after 3 years of marriage, she'd still catch my eye across a crowded room and smile this secret smile that was just for me. Now, nothing. She'd look at Noah, at the TV, at her phone, at the wall behind my head, anywhere except directly at me. And on the rare occasions when our eyes did meet accidentally, she'd look away so fast you'd think I was Medusa or something. 3 days after we got home, I finally worked up the courage to bring up Roman's comment. I was helping Sierra put away some baby clothes that her sister had dropped off, and the house was quiet except for Noah's soft breathing from his bassinet. It felt like maybe, finally, we could have a real conversation. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual as I folded a tiny blue onesie. "About what Roman said at the hospital." Sierra's hand stopped moving. She was holding this little yellow sleeper, and I watched her knuckles go white as she gripped it. "Roman was just being an idiot," I continued, echoing the same line I'd been telling myself. "You know how he is. He can't help himself when it comes to stirring up drama." I waited for her to agree, to roll her eyes and say something like, "Your brother's such a moron," or, "I can't believe he said that." Something normal. Something that would let me know we were okay. Instead, she carefully folded the sleeper and placed it in the drawer without saying a word. "Sierra, I pressed. Did something happen between you two? That's when she finally looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something flash across her face. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell, but it was gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. Don't ruin this moment, she said quietly. Don't ruin this moment. Like I was the one causing problems. Like I was the one who'd brought poison into our perfect little family tableau. The words hit me like a slap, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, not yet, but definitely crack. I stood there holding that stupid baby onesie, looking at my wife, the woman I'd promised to love and cherish and trust with my life, and I realized that I didn't recognize her anymore. This wasn't the Sierra who used to steal fries off my plate or leave me dorky love notes in my lunchbox. This was someone else entirely, someone who kept secrets and avoided conversations and treated perfectly reasonable questions like attacks. That night, I lay in bed listening to her breathe, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. When had we become these people who couldn't even talk to each other? When had my simple question about my brother become something that could ruin the moment? And that's when I knew, deep in my gut, that Roman's joke hadn't been a joke at all. Roman showed up the next weekend like nothing had happened. That's classic Roman for you. Drop a bomb in someone's life, then waltz back in acting like you're doing them a favor. He rolled up in his shiny black Tesla, music thumping loud enough to wake the dead, and came strutting up our front walk carrying more shopping bags than a suburban mom on Black Friday. Uncle Roman's here, he announced, like he was some kind of celebrity making a grand entrance. The guy's got zero sense of timing, I swear. Sierra was finally having a decent day. First time all week she'd actually smiled at breakfast, and here comes my brother ready to turn everything upside down again. But I'll give him credit where it's due. The man knows how to shop. He brought this top-of-the-line stroller that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Thing looked like it could survive a nuclear apocalypse and still give Noah a smooth ride. Then there was a tablet. Some fancy educational thing for babies that I didn't even know existed, and enough designer baby clothes to stock a boutique. Little guy deserves the best, Roman said as he pulled item after item out of those bags. Nothing's too good for my nephew. The way he said my nephew made my skin crawl, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Maybe it was the emphasis he put on the word my, or maybe it was just my paranoia kicking into overdrive. Either way, something about the whole scene felt off. Sierra seemed genuinely happy for the first time in days, cooing over the tiny designer outfits and thanking Roman way more enthusiastically than she'd thanked me for anything lately. She held up this little navy blue Ralph Lauren onesie and actually laughed, a real laugh, not one of those fake polite ones she'd been giving me all week. This is gorgeous, Roman, she said. You really didn't have to do all this. Course I did, he replied, and I swear he shot me this look. Like he was proving a point or something. Family takes care of family, right? I was trying to figure out what the hell that was supposed to mean when Roman asked if he could hold Noah. Sierra handed him over without hesitation, and I watched my brother cradle my son like he'd been doing it his whole life. The guy who couldn't keep a houseplant alive was suddenly Mr. Natural when it came to handling a newborn. That's when things got really weird. Roman started talking to Noah in this soft voice I'd never heard him use before. Hey there, little man, he whispered. You're gonna be something special, aren't you? Yeah, you are. Uncle Roman's gonna make sure you have everything you need. Then he whipped out his phone and started taking pictures. Lots of pictures. Selfies with Noah, close-ups of the baby's face, shots of him holding Noah by the window where the light was perfect. At first, I thought it was normal uncle behavior. Everyone takes pictures of babies, right? But there was something about the way he was doing it that made my stomach twist. He wasn't just snapping quick photos to show his friends. He was being deliberate about it, adjusting angles, making sure Noah's face was clearly visible in every shot. And the way he looked at Noah while he was taking those pictures, it wasn't the way an uncle looks at his nephew. It was the way a father looks at his son. Sierra noticed it too. I caught her watching Roman with this expression I couldn't read. Not quite suspicious, but definitely uncomfortable. When Roman asked if he could take Noah outside for some photos in the garden, she hesitated for just a second too long before saying yes. He's really bonding with Noah, she said after Roman had stepped outside. But the way she said it sounded more like a question than a statement. After Roman left, with promises to come back soon and bring even more gifts, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The whole visit felt like a performance, like Roman was playing some role that none of the rest of us understood. And those photos, there were way too many photos. That night, after Sierra fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about my brother. Roman's always been competitive with me, had to have the better car, the bigger house, the prettier girlfriend. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that scared the hell out of me. Around 2 in the morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I crept downstairs to my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I hacked into Roman's cloud account. I know, it sounds crazy. But here's the thing about my brother. He's smart about a lot of things, but technology isn't one of them. He's been using the same password for everything since we were teenagers. Our dog's name plus his high school graduation year. Rex Rules 2008. Took me exactly 1 try to get in. At first, everything looked normal. Work documents, vacation photos, screenshots of cars he wanted to buy. Just typical Roman stuff. But then I found a folder labeled Personal and clicked on it. That's when my world fell apart. There were pictures of Sierra, lots of pictures, and not the kind of pictures you'd expect to find on your brother's phone. These were intimate photos from her pregnancy. Sierra in our bedroom, showing off her growing belly. Sierra in maternity clothes I recognized from her baby shower. Sierra looking beautiful and glowing and absolutely, unmistakably pregnant. The timestamps on the photos made my blood run cold. They were all from months ago, during her second trimester. Months before Roman's joke at the hospital, months before I had any reason to suspect anything was wrong. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, feeling like I was going to throw up. These weren't photos Sierra had sent to family members or posted on social media. These were private, personal photos that could only have been taken by someone who was there with her. Someone she trusted. Someone she was close enough to let into our bedroom, into our life, into our marriage. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through photo after photo, each one feeling like a knife to the gut. There was Sierra laughing at something off camera. Sierra touching her belly with this soft, dreamy expression. Sierra looking happy and radiant and completely at ease with whoever was behind the camera. And that person was my brother. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. Hell, I'm not sure I even blinked. I just sat there in my home office, staring at those photos on my laptop screen until my eyes burned and my vision went blurry. Every time I tried to close the browser, I'd think of some detail I might have missed, some clue that would make this whole nightmare make sense. But the more I looked, the worse it got. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I'd memorized every single image. The way Sierra's hand rested on her belly in that blue maternity dress I'd bought her for Mother's Day. The intimate smile she was giving whoever was behind the camera. The timestamp that proved these photos were taken while I was away on that week-long business trip to Denver. The trip where I'd called her every night, and she'd told me how much she missed me, how she was just staying home watching Netflix and eating ice cream. Apparently, she'd been doing a lot more than that. I heard Sierra moving around upstairs, getting ready for another day of pretending everything was normal. The floorboards creaked as she walked to Noah's room. Then the soft sounds of her talking to him in that sweet baby voice that used to make my heart melt. Now it just made me feel sick. I printed out 3 of the clearest photos and tucked them into a manila folder. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the paper straight. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide whether I was going to keep living this lie or blow up my entire life looking for the truth. When Sierra came downstairs carrying Noah, she looked almost normal. Hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing one of my old college t-shirts and yoga pants, that natural morning glow that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. For just a second, I wanted to put those photos back in the folder and pretend I'd never seen them. Maybe we could go back to being the happy family I thought we were. But then I remembered Roman's smirk at the hospital, the way he'd held Noah like he belonged to him, the careful way Sierra had been avoiding my eyes for days. "Sierra," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended, like I'd been chain-smoking all night. "We need to talk." She froze in the doorway, Noah balanced on her hip. "About what?" she asked, but something in her expression told me she already knew. I pulled the folder out from behind my back and set it on the kitchen island between us. "About these." Sierra's face went through about 5 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fear, guilt. And finally, this weird kind of relief, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks and could finally exhale. She didn't even try to deny it. Didn't ask where I got them or how I found them or try to explain them away. She just looked at those photos, her photos, and her shoulders sagged like someone had cut the strings holding her up. Eli, she started, but I held up my hand. Just tell me the truth, I said. For once, just tell me the goddamn truth. That's when she broke. I've seen Sierra cry before, at movies, when her grandmother died, during our wedding vows. But this was different. This wasn't pretty crying with a single tear rolling down her cheek. This was ugly, soul-deep sobbing that seemed to come from somewhere primal. She sank to the floor right there in our kitchen, still holding Noah, and just fell apart. It was one time, she choked out between sobs. Eli, I swear to God, it was only one time. One time. Like that was supposed to make it better. Like the number of times mattered when your wife sleeps with your brother. When? I asked. My voice sounded weird and distant, like it was coming from someone else. Roman came to visit while you were on that business trip, she said, not looking at me. The Denver trip. I was lonely, and I was emotional, and I was stupid. So incredibly stupid. The Denver trip. The one where I'd been trying to land the Morrison account, working 18-hour days and calling her every night because I missed her so much. While I was busting my ass in conference rooms and hotel bars, my brother was in my house, in my bed, with my wife. I didn't know I was pregnant, Sierra continued, her voice getting higher and more desperate. I thought it was yours. I wanted it to be yours. When I found out about the baby, I was so happy because I thought we were finally going to have our family, and I could just forget about that one terrible mistake. She was still talking, still explaining, still making excuses, but I couldn't hear her anymore. There was this ringing in my ears, like someone had set off a bomb right next to my head. I kept staring at those photos spread out on the kitchen island, evidence of my brother and my wife's betrayal, and thinking about all the nights I'd lain awake worrying about being a good father. Being a father. That was the kicker, wasn't it? All this time I'd been planning Noah's future, picking out college funds, and thinking about teaching him to ride a bike, and he might not even be mine. My son, the kid I'd already fallen completely in love with, might be my brother's. Please say something, Sierra begged. Eli, please. I know I screwed up. I know I ruined everything. But we can fix this. We can get through this. I looked at her sitting there on our kitchen floor, holding this baby that might not be ours, and I felt something inside me go completely numb. Not angry, not hurt, just empty. Like someone had reached into my chest and scooped out everything that used to be there. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Instead, I walked past her, past the photos, past the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my life, and headed for the front door. Where are you going? Sierra called after me. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I don't know, I said. And that was the truth. I had absolutely no idea where to go or what to do or how to process any of this. So I got in my car and drove around aimlessly for hours, thinking about DNA tests and business trips and brothers who steal more than just your favorite toys. 2 weeks of pure hell. That's what it was like living in our house after Sierra's confession. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when absolutely necessary, keeping up this pathetic charade for Noah's sake. Sierra slept in the guest room, claiming it was easier for the night feedings, but we both knew the real reason. I couldn't stand to look at her, and she couldn't stand the weight of my judgment. I'd been going through the motions of normal life, making coffee, going to work, pretending to care about quarterly reports and client meetings, but inside I felt like I was drowning. Every time I looked at Noah, I saw a question mark instead of my son. Did he have Roman's nose? Sierra's eyes? Or were those features I'd been attributing to our family actually belonging to someone else entirely? The appointment with Dr. Hallstrom was supposed to be routine. Just a standard 2-week checkup to make sure Noah was hitting his milestones, gaining weight properly, all that normal new parent stuff. Sierra had circled the date on our kitchen calendar with a pink marker weeks ago, back when we were still pretending to be a happy family. Back when the biggest worry in my life was whether we had enough diapers. We barely spoke during the 20-minute drive to the pediatric clinic. Sierra sat in the passenger seat clutching the diaper bag like it was a life preserver, staring out the window at the strip malls and coffee shops that made up our suburban landscape. I kept the radio on some mindless pop station, letting the upbeat music fill the silence between us. In the back seat, Noah slept peacefully in his car seat, completely oblivious to the fact that his parents' marriage was imploding around him. The waiting room was exactly what you'd expect from a kid's doctor. Bright primary colors, toys scattered around, cartoon characters painted on the walls. Under normal circumstances, I would have been one of those proud new dads, probably boring the other parents with stories about how smart Noah was, or how he'd already smiled at me. Instead, I sat there flipping through a 6-month-old issue of Parents magazine and trying not to think about paternity tests. Mercer family, the nurse called out, and we followed her down a hallway lined with more cartoon animals. Dr. Hallstrom's office was small but warm, with family photos on his desk and certificates covering one wall. The guy had been practicing pediatric medicine for 25 years, delivered half the babies in our zip code, and had this grandfatherly vibe that usually put parents at ease. But something was off from the moment he walked in. Dr. Hallstrom had always been the type of doctor who entered a room with a smile and a joke, asking about how the new parents were sleeping and whether grandma was driving everyone crazy with advice. Today, he came in looking at his tablet with this serious expression, barely acknowledging us before focusing on Noah. He went through the standard routine, checking Noah's reflexes, listening to his heart, measuring his length and weight. But I could see him glancing back at his tablet every few minutes, like he was comparing what he was seeing with what was written there. His usual cheerful bedside manner was replaced with this clinical detachment that made my stomach start churning. "Everything looks good physically," Dr. Hallstrom said, setting down his stethoscope. "Noah's growing well. His responses are normal for his age, no immediate health concerns." That should have been good news, but the way he said it, like he was reading from a script, made it sound ominous. Sierra and I exchanged glances for the first time in days, both of us picking up on the weird vibe in the room. Then Dr. Hallstrom did something that made my blood turn to ice. He looked at Noah again, then at me, then at Sierra, then back at his tablet. It was like he was trying to solve some kind of puzzle, and the pieces weren't fitting together the way they should. His smile started to fade, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. The friendly neighborhood pediatrician disappeared, replaced by someone who looked deeply uncomfortable and maybe a little confused. "Mr. Mercer," he said slowly, setting his tablet down on the examination table. "May I speak with you outside?" The bottom dropped out of my world. Whatever was on that tablet, whatever Dr. Hallstrom had found, it was bad enough that he didn't want Sierra to hear it. My mouth went dry, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. "No," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Whatever you need to say it here." Dr. Hallstrom hesitated, looking back and forth between Sierra and me like he was trying to figure out how to drop a bomb without destroying everything in the blast radius. Sierra had gone completely pale, clutching Noah tighter against her chest. "I need to ask you something," he said finally. "And I need you to be completely honest with me. Was your brother present at the hospital during the delivery?" Sierra's sharp intake of breath was the loudest sound in the room. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut, but I managed to nod. "Yeah," I said. "Roman was there." "What?" Dr. Hallstrom picked up his tablet again, scrolling through whatever information had him so rattled. "There's a serious issue with the birth records," he said, "and a genetic alert that's been flagged in our system. Our new AI screening protocol has detected some irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had known since Roman made that joke in the hospital room. Dr. Hallstrom looked directly at me, and I could see genuine sympathy in his eyes. The kind that suggests Noah's biological father isn't who we have listed on the birth certificate. Sierra made a sound that was part sob, part moan. Noah started fussing, picking up on the tension in the room, even though he couldn't understand what was happening. And I just stood there, feeling like the floor had opened up beneath my feet, and I was falling into some kind of nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The silence in that room was deafening. Dr. Hallstrom stood there holding his tablet like it contained the secrets of the universe, while Sierra clutched Noah so tightly I was worried she might hurt him. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else except the sound of Noah's soft whimpering. "What exactly are you saying?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I needed him to spell it out, to say the words that would either destroy my life or somehow make this whole nightmare go away. Dr. Hallstrom stepped back from the examination table, and that's when I knew we were in serious trouble. This wasn't just about paternity anymore. Something much bigger was happening here. something that had turned our friendly neighborhood pediatrician into someone who looked genuinely scared. I need to be very careful about how I explain this, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. What I've discovered in your son's file goes way beyond a simple paternity question. He turned his tablet around so we could see the screen, and I found myself staring at what looked like a medical database filled with numbers and codes that meant absolutely nothing to me. But Dr. Hallstrom's finger was pointing to something specific, a section highlighted in red that made Sierra gasp out loud. The DNA profile in our hospital system has been manually altered, he explained. Someone with administrative access went into Noah's records and changed the biological markers. They tried to hide the real paternity data and replace it with falsified information. I felt the room start to spin. Someone changed Noah's records? Who the hell would do that? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Dr. Hallstrom said. But here's the thing. Our hospital just implemented a new AI safeguard system that cross-references all genetic data against a federal database. It's designed to catch exactly this kind of fraud. The system flagged Noah's file because the biological markers didn't match what was listed. Sierra was shaking now, literally shaking like she was freezing cold. I don't understand, she whispered. What does this mean? Dr. Hallstrom looked at both of us with something that might have been pity. It means someone deliberately tried to cover up Noah's true paternity by falsifying medical records. And based on the digital fingerprints in the system, they knew exactly what they were doing. Digital fingerprints? I asked. Every change made in our system leaves a trace. User IDs, timestamps, IP addresses. Whoever did this used legitimate credentials, which means they either work here or they had help from someone who does. My brain was struggling to process what he was telling me. Someone had hacked into the hospital's computer system to hide the truth about Noah's father. This wasn't just about Sierra's affair anymore. This was fraud, manipulation, maybe even criminal activity. Doctor, I said slowly, are you telling me that my brother is Noah's biological father? Dr. Hallstrom nodded grimly. The AI system ran the comparison against all available genetic data in our database. Roman Mercer is listed as a blood donor here at the hospital. He gave blood during a charity drive 6 months ago. The system matched Noah's DNA profile to his within a 99.7% certainty. Sierra let out a sound that was part sob, part scream. Noah started crying in earnest now, picking up on the chaos around him. And I just stood there feeling like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart with their bare hands. But how is this possible? I asked. How could someone just change medical records like that? That's what I'm wondering too, Dr. Hallstrom said. And that's why I need to make a phone call. He walked over to his desk and picked up the landline. But instead of dialing, he turned back to us with this expression I'd never seen on a doctor's face before. He looked scared. Actually scared. I'm going to need to contact the authorities, he said. What I found here points to systematic medical fraud and unauthorized paternity manipulation. This isn't just a family issue anymore. This is potentially criminal activity. Criminal. Sierra's voice cracked on the word. Falsifying medical records is a felony, Dr. Hallstrom explained, especially when it involves birth certificates and paternity documentation. Someone went to great lengths to hide the truth about Noah's father, and they used fraudulent means to do it. He pressed a button on his phone, and I heard a woman's voice answer. Security? This is Dr. Hallstrom in room 4. I need you to initiate lockdown protocol immediately and call the police. We have a situation here that requires immediate investigation. Sierra was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she rocked Noah back and forth. I didn't know, she kept saying. I swear I didn't know about any records being changed. I thought maybe the timing was just coincidence. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was thinking about Roman's behavior at the hospital, the way he'd taken all those photos, his comment about Noah being too good-looking to be mine. This hadn't been a joke or a casual affair. This had been planned, calculated. My brother had seduced my wife, gotten her pregnant, and then systematically covered his tracks by hacking into medical records. Dr. Hallstrom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady considering my entire world was collapsing around me. Noah is not my son, is he? He looked at me with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, Eli. According to the genetic data, Noah is your brother's child. The words hit me like physical blows. Every hope I'd had for my family, Every dream I'd built around being Noah's father, every moment of love and pride I'd felt holding him, all of it was based on a lie. A carefully constructed, deliberately maintained lie. Dr. Hallstrom pressed another button on his phone. Security, room 4. Lockdown protocol. And call the police. We need them here now. The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and bad coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. They'd kept us there for 3 hours, taking statements, asking the same questions over and over until my head was pounding. Sierra had been taken to a separate room, standard procedure, they'd said, while I sat in this cramped interrogation room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Detective Morrison was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that had seen way too much human ugliness. She'd been patient with me, letting me tell the story at my own pace, but I could see the wheels turning behind those eyes. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about fraud, identity theft, and God knows what else. We're going to need to examine all of your brother's electronic devices, she told me. Computers, phones, tablets, anything that might have been used to access the hospital's database. Do you know if he has equipment at your house? That's when I remembered the laptop. Roman had given it to me about 6 months ago, claiming he'd upgraded to something newer and didn't need it anymore. Figured you could use it for work stuff, he'd said, all casual and brotherly. At the time, I thought it was just another one of his generous gestures. Roman was always giving away expensive things he'd gotten bored with. Now I was wondering if there was a more sinister reason he'd wanted that laptop out of his house. By the time they released me, it was almost midnight. Sierra had been let go an hour earlier, but she'd gone to her sister's place instead of coming home. Probably for the best. I wasn't ready to deal with her guilt and tears on top of everything else swirling around in my head. The house felt like a tomb when I walked through the front door. All of Noah's baby gear was still scattered around the living room. The bouncy seat, the play mat with its colorful dangling toys, the bottle warmer Sierra had insisted we needed. Just this morning, those things had represented our future as a family. Now they felt like evidence of how naive I'd been. I found Roman's old laptop in my home office, buried under a stack of client files I'd been meaning to organize. It was a sleek MacBook Pro, probably worth more than most people's cars, with Roman's initials engraved on the back in that pretentious font he loved. I'd barely used the thing. My work computer handled everything I needed, but now I was grateful for Roman's arrogance. The guy had always been careless about passwords. Even as kids, he'd used the same combination for his locker, his bike lock, everything. Our childhood dog's name plus whatever year seemed significant to him. It took me exactly 3 tries to get into his user account, Rex Rules 2008, his high school graduation year. At first, everything looked normal. Work documents from his marketing firm, vacation photos from his trip to Cabo last year, screenshots of expensive watches he wanted to buy. Classic Roman stuff. All surface, no substance. But I knew my brother well enough to know that if he was hiding something, it wouldn't be in the obvious places. I spent 2 hours digging through folders, checking browser histories, looking at downloaded files. Nothing. Either Roman had been more careful than I'd given him credit for, or I was barking up the wrong tree entirely. I was about to give up and call it a night when I noticed something weird about the hard drive space. The laptop showed 500 gigabytes of storage, but only about 300 gigabytes was accounted for in the visible files. That meant there were roughly 200 gigabytes of data hidden somewhere on the machine. I ran a search for hidden files and folders, and that's when I found it. A folder buried deep in the system files, labeled Legacy Plan. Legacy Plan. What the hell kind of name was that for a hidden folder? I clicked on it, expecting to find more vacation photos or maybe some work project Roman hadn't wanted me to see. Instead, I found a digital treasure trove that made my blood run cold. There were dozens of files organized into subfolders with clinical precision. Target analysis, timeline planning, infrastructure access, contingency protocols. It looked like something out of a spy movie, except the target wasn't some foreign government. It was my life. The target analysis folder contained a psychological profile of Sierra that was so detailed and accurate, it made me sick to my stomach. Roman had documented her schedule, her emotional patterns, her vulnerabilities. He knew that she got lonely when I traveled for work. He knew that she'd been feeling insecure about her post-pregnancy body. He knew exactly which buttons to push to make her feel desired and appreciated. One document, titled Opportunity Assessment, laid out his strategy in black and white. Subject demonstrates increased emotional vulnerability during spouse's extended business trips. Historical data suggests optimal approach window during Denver project timeline. The Denver project. My week-long business trip where I'd been trying to land the Morrison account. Roman had planned the whole thing around my absence, timing his move for when Sierra would be most susceptible to his manipulation. But the worst part was in the infrastructure access folder. Roman had been planning this for months, maybe longer. He'd used his connections at the hospital. Apparently, he'd dated a nurse from the records department to get access to the computer system. He'd researched how to alter DNA profiles, studied the hospital's security protocols, even created backup plans in case his initial attempts failed. There were email threads with usernames I didn't recognize, discussing genetic data manipulation and birth certificate modification. Screenshots of the hospital's internal database. Step-by-step instructions for covering digital tracks. And then I found the smoking gun. An email exchange with someone whose handle was medtech_Sarah that made everything crystal clear. She's lonely, Roman had written. All I have to do is show up while Eli's gone and play protector. She'll cave within 48 hours. Sarah's response was equally chilling. Once you confirm pregnancy, I can handle the rest from my end. Birth records, genetic markers, paternity documentation, all of it can be adjusted. Just give me the timeline. Roman's reply was a single line that hit me like a sledgehammer. Perfect. By the time this is over, I'll have everything that should have been mine from the beginning. Everything that should have been mine from the beginning. Not just Sierra, not just the baby. Everything. My marriage, my family, my entire life. Roman hadn't just stolen my wife and gotten her pregnant. He'd systematically planned to take over my entire existence. I sat there staring at the laptop screen, feeling like I was drowning in the scope of my brother's betrayal. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. This was premeditated psychological warfare, carried out by someone who was supposed to love me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I copied everything from Roman's laptop onto 3 separate flash drives and called Detective Morrison at 6 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, which told me she'd been expecting my call. I found it, I said without any preamble. All of it. Roman's planning documents, his communications with someone at the hospital, everything. Bring it in, she said immediately. Don't touch anything else on that computer, don't delete anything. Just bring the whole machine and whatever copies you made. The police station was buzzing with activity when I arrived an hour later. Word had apparently gotten out about the case. Medical fraud involving falsified birth records was the kind of story that made headlines, especially in our small town where the biggest crime was usually teenagers spray painting the water tower. Detective Morrison and her partner, Detective Chun, spent 3 hours going through Roman's files while I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair drinking terrible coffee and watching them work. Every few minutes, one of them would whistle under their breath or mutter something like, "Jesus Christ," under their breath. Not exactly confidence-inspiring. "This is bigger than we thought," Detective Morrison finally said, looking up from the laptop screen. "Your brother wasn't working alone. We've identified at least 3 hospital employees who were involved in the records manipulation, plus someone in the IT department who helped him access the system remotely." How many people knew? I asked. The question had been eating at me all night. How many people had watched me play proud father while knowing the truth? Hard to say, Detective Chin replied. But based on these communications, it looks like Roman convinced most of them that he was trying to protect the baby from some kind of custody dispute. He's a good liar, your brother. Yeah, he was. I'd been falling for his lies my entire life. They arrested Roman at his house 3 days later. I wasn't there. The police thought it was better if I stayed away, but Detective Morrison called me right afterward to let me know it had gone down without incident. He didn't resist, she said, almost like he was expecting us. The charges were extensive: fraud, falsifying medical documents, identity tampering, conspiracy, and something called unauthorized access to protected health information. His bail was set at $250,000, which his lawyer paid immediately. Even facing felony charges, Roman still had enough money to buy his way out of jail. Sierra was released on her own recognizance after 12 hours of questioning. Turns out she really hadn't known about the medical records fraud. Roman had kept that part of his plan to himself. But she was still facing potential charges as an accessory, depending on what the investigation turned up. She filed for separation 2 days after Roman's arrest. Her lawyer served me papers while I was at work, which was probably for the best. I don't think I could have handled seeing her face to face again, not after everything that had come out. The hardest part was the custody situation. Sierra had full physical custody of Noah. Obviously, he was still nursing, and despite everything, she was his mother. But the courts didn't know what to do about the fact that his legal father wasn't actually his father, and his biological father was sitting in jail awaiting trial. I could have fought for visitation rights. My lawyer said I had a decent case, considering that I'd been deceived about Noah's paternity and had already bonded with him as his father. But what would have been the point? Every time I looked at that kid, I'd be reminded of Roman's betrayal and Sierra's lies. How could I give him the love he deserved when his very existence was tied to the worst moment of my life? So I made the hardest decision I've ever made. I signed away any legal claim to Noah. I relinquished all parental rights and responsibilities. On paper, it was like I'd never been his father at all. But that was just on paper. In my heart, where it mattered, I'd always be the guy who held him when he took his first breath. I'd always be the man who loved him before he even knew what love was. Roman could claim biological paternity all he wanted, but he'd never have those first precious moments that belonged to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Roman had orchestrated this elaborate scheme to steal my life, but in the end, all he'd gotten was a baby he'd never really know and a prison sentence that would define his next decade. Meanwhile, I was free to start over, to build something real instead of living in the shadow of his manipulation. It was a bitter kind of freedom, but it was mine. The first time I went to see Noah after Sierra moved in with her sister, I almost turned around in the driveway. Melissa's house was this cute little ranch in the suburbs, with a white picket fence and flower boxes that screamed, normal family lives here. Everything I thought I'd had, everything I'd lost, sitting right there in someone else's front yard. Sierra met me at the door holding Noah, and for a second, it felt like old times. She'd put him in one of those little outfits I'd bought during her pregnancy, a blue onesie with a dinosaur on it that I'd thought was hilarious at the time. Now it just reminded me that I'd been picking out clothes for someone else's kid. "He's been fussy today," Sierra said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I think he's going through a growth spurt." I nodded and reached for Noah, and he came to me without hesitation. That killed me. The kid had no idea that his entire world had been turned upside down, that the man he'd been calling daddy in his baby brain wasn't actually his father. He just saw someone familiar, someone safe, and he relaxed against my chest like he belonged there. We sat in Melissa's living room making awkward small talk while Noah dozed in my arms. Sierra told me about his feeding schedule, how he'd started sleeping for longer stretches at night, all the normal new mom stuff that felt surreal given our circumstances. It was like we were playing house, pretending to be co-parents when we both knew this was probably going to be one of the last times I'd hold him. "The lawyer says Roman's trial probably won't start for another 6 months, Sierra said, fidgeting with her wedding ring. She was still wearing it, though I couldn't figure out why. "His team is trying to get the charges reduced." "Good for him," I said, not meaning it. Part of me hoped Roman would spend the next decade behind bars, but another part of me just wanted this whole nightmare to be over so I could move on with whatever was left of my life. Sierra started crying then, these quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking down at her hands. "Eli, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think you could ever forgive me?" I looked down at Noah, who was making those little baby sounds in his sleep, completely peaceful and unaware of the chaos surrounding him. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I can't even figure out how to forgive myself for being so blind." That was the truth. I'd been so focused on being angry at Sierra and Roman that I hadn't dealt with my own feelings of stupidity and shame. How had I missed the signs? How had I let my brother manipulate me so completely? How had I been so goddamn naive? The second visit was harder. Noah was more alert this time, looking around with those big blue eyes, Sierra's eyes, definitely not Roman's brown ones, and actually smiling when he saw me. Not just gas, but a real smile that lit up his whole face. It was like getting punched in the heart by a tiny fist. I spent an hour just talking to him, telling him about my day, even though he couldn't understand a word I was saying. I changed his diaper, fed him a bottle, walked around the living room singing stupid songs I'd made up during those first few weeks when I thought he was mine. For an hour, I let myself pretend that nothing had changed. But when it was time to leave, reality crashed back down. This wasn't my house, this wasn't my family, and this beautiful little boy wasn't my son. I was just a visitor now, someone who used to matter but didn't anymore. I knew I couldn't keep doing this to myself. Or to Noah, for that matter. Kids are smart, even babies. Eventually, he'd pick up on the tension and confusion surrounding our relationship. He deserved better than growing up with some weird quasi-father figure who couldn't look at him without remembering the worst betrayal of his life. So I made the decision that everyone said was crazy, but felt right in my gut. I called my lawyer and told him I wanted to terminate all my parental rights. No visitation, no custody arrangement, no legal ties whatsoever. I wanted Noah to have a clean slate, free from the mess that Roman and Sierra had created. Are you sure about this? My lawyer asked. Once you sign these papers, there's no going back. Legally, it'll be like you were never his father. I was never his father, I said. That's the whole point. But before I signed anything, I had one last thing to do. I spent an entire weekend writing a letter to Noah, not the baby he was now, but the young man he'd hopefully become someday. I wanted him to know the truth, all of it, told from my perspective without the filter of other people's guilt or shame. I wrote about the moment he was born, how perfect he looked, how completely I'd fallen in love with him before I even knew his name. I wrote about the joy I'd felt holding him, the plans I'd made for his future, the way he'd changed my entire understanding of what love could be. I also wrote about Roman's betrayal, but I tried to do it without turning Noah against his biological father. That wasn't my call to make. Someday, if Noah wanted to have a relationship with Roman, that would be his choice. I just wanted him to know that there had been someone else there at the beginning, someone who'd loved him purely and completely for those first precious weeks. I wasn't your biological father, I wrote in the final paragraph, but I was there when you took your first breath. I fought for the truth when everyone else was living a lie. And I loved you in the purest way a man can love, without expecting anything in return, without needing you to be anything other than exactly who you are. I sealed the letter in an envelope marked, for Noah Mercer, to be opened on his 18th birthday, and gave it to my lawyer to hold. Maybe Noah would never want to read it. Maybe by the time he turned 18, I'd just be some footnote in his family history that no one talked about anymore. But if he ever wondered about those first few weeks of his life, if he ever needed to know that someone had loved him completely and unconditionally from the very beginning, the letter would be there waiting for him. I left town 3 months after signing those papers, packed everything I owned into a U-Haul truck, and drove west until I hit the ocean. Didn't have a plan, didn't have a job lined up, didn't even know where I was going to sleep that first night. I just knew I couldn't stay in a place where every corner held memories of the life I thought I'd had. I ended up in a little coastal town in Northern California, the kind of place where people come to disappear or start over. Rented a tiny apartment above a coffee shop, got a job managing a local bookstore, and tried to figure out who Eli Mercer was supposed to be when he wasn't somebody's husband or somebody's father. The ocean helped. There's something about watching waves crash against rocks day after day that puts things in perspective. Those waves have been doing the same thing for millions of years, wearing down mountains grain by grain, turning sharp edges into smooth stones. They don't care about human drama or broken hearts or brothers who steal your life. They just keep rolling in, patient and relentless and somehow comforting. I started running on the beach every morning before work. Nothing crazy, just a few miles along the shoreline while the sun came up and the world was still quiet. It gave me time to think, or sometimes not to think, which was just as valuable. Some days I'd run past other early risers, dog walkers, surfers checking the waves, old couples holding hands, and I'd wonder what their stories were. What had brought them to this edge of the world? Work was good too. The bookstore was owned by this 60-year-old former English professor named Margaret who'd burned out on academia and decided to spend her retirement surrounded by stories instead of students. She didn't ask too many questions about my past, just said I looked like someone who needed a fresh start and left it at that. Smart woman. Roman got 18 months in federal prison, plus 5 years probation. His lawyer managed to get most of the charges reduced by arguing that he'd acted out of emotional distress rather than criminal intent. I read about it in an online article that someone from my old town sent me, but it felt like reading about a stranger. The anger I'd carried for so long had settled into something quieter, something more like pity. Sierra sends me updates sometimes. Just brief emails letting me know that Noah is healthy and hitting his milestones. Walking at 10 months. First words at 14 months. Starting preschool. I never respond to these messages, but I don't delete them either. They sit in a folder on my computer labeled Before, along with photos from our wedding and ultrasound images from Sierra's pregnancy. Pieces of a life that belonged to someone else. Every now and then, usually late at night when the coffee shop below my apartment is closed and the street is empty, I take out the copy I made of Noah's letter and read it. Not because I regret my decision, I don't, but because it reminds me that I'm capable of loving someone completely, even when it costs me everything. The truth doesn't just destroy, I've learned. Sometimes it frees you too. It frees you from living other people's lives, from building your happiness on someone else's foundation, from mistaking what you have for what you deserve. I'm building something real now, something that belongs entirely to me. It's smaller than what I had before, quieter, but it's honest. And when I whisper those words to the ocean breeze, you were the best part of my worst day, I mean them with every fiber of my being. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them go.